This hands-free printer was developed to print thank you letters in an automated way. It would tell people to put in the next paper, and they would click OK in the dialog telling them what to do, and it would start the print job for them. And then they would be told to put in a different type of paper and so on. So this is available. This is a development version for the Mac. It should be available within the next week or so. It's been a long time in development, but it's here, almost. And Windows has the same functionality. Windows version has been out for a while. So I'm just going to print a test page. The print window popped up briefly. The layout for the test page popped up briefly. And this is using a PDF printer driver. So the result actually appeared over here. It looks like that. And we can control a bunch of different options in the print dialog using script parameters to the EP print function call. We can control paper size, so let's try setting that to B5 and try our script again. I'll close that, and it created a new document over here, which is narrower and longer than this one. Paper size. Close it. We can do things like set the first page number to 10. We can print page 1 through 3. Try that. And here we have 3 pages, and the first one is number 10. So this is great for anyone who has complicated print jobs. If you can use FileMaker to restore print settings like these, but you would need a different restore for every combination of options. So you have 5 paper sizes and 5 paper sources. That's 25 different print restore steps instead of just 2 variables here. Another thing you can do is return the name of the printer as available. So clicking this field, I don't know if you noticed, the print dialog briefly popped up. And we extracted the names of the 3 printers on the system. And if you then click this button, we can pop it up again and get the suggested paper, the supported paper size on the sources.
So it's actually querying the printer driver itself.
No, it's controlling the print dialog. It's kind of like an automated user that opens up the dialog, looks at the stuff in the dialog.
To get all the printer options, is it getting that from the UI or from the actual driver?
It's getting it from the dialog.
Wow.
So
it's like kind of scraping it?
Yeah.
it's scraping these first 3 options out of the
That's
pop-up.
great. That's great.
Are you using accessibility?
No, it does not use the accessibility API, so people don't have to turn that on. It works without that turned on. Let's see. I think that's it for mystery printer. Any questions? Looks like I'm about over halfway done. Now our next plugin is called Dialog Master. And this is one I think deserves some more attention. I think it's pretty cool. It's basically a way of doing dialogues with variable formatting. This dialog looks kind of complicated, but it was actually created just by creating one control after another. And it will lay the controls out for you according to Macintosh user interface guidelines. So it'll decide that these checkboxes are getting too wide, and it'll break them to the next line and format them into next columns and stuff. We can look how that was constructed. Here is the construction. It's an EP dialog function call. It's giving the title. I'm going to show you the dialog again with the evaluate button. And it's just a text control containing your name, a field that's blank, another text control, radio buttons, simple value list. So we have never with a new line character is the P, and 1 and 2, etc. And then checkboxes. I've got to close this in order to scroll down.
What does it do with all of the selections once you close the window then? Because I don't see field names being called.
Let's see. So this is the result of the dialog. It has all the things that you typed in as parameters.
Oh, it's name value pairs.
Yeah, it's name value pairs. And you can also use this result directly, or you can call EP dialog result function call to get the variables returned by the last dialog that was called. So we have just one checkbox after another, and it formats them for you. Now, if you don't like the way it formatted them, we have the exact same dialog box here with the same controls, but we've added a few hints in order to change how the controls are formatted. So we've added a button default equals continue and a button cancel equals cancel, which means escape cancels and enter presses the continue button. We've made it a floating dialog, which is another unique feature. It basically means this dialog floats and you can interact with FileMaker while the dialog is still up. Yeah, mobilist.
And can you have any button be the continue button?
Yes. Yeah. You can have any number of buttons. Buttons can be put anywhere. They don't just have to be at the bottom.
Great.
So we've added columns 2 parameter to our radio buttons, so now we have 2 column radio buttons. For the checkboxes, we've added new line equals yes to fast food, so it begins a new line. Mexican begins a new line, vegetarian begins a new line, so on. So we can also do a floating dialog that acts as a toolbox. So these buttons launch scripts that take us to different pages of our example file.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Does the focus stay on that?
No, I mean, you can use FileMaker.
One button to return, focus, and run me. So go ahead, click that. Yeah, nice.
And then it's triggered by a script to invoke that mobile the dialog?
Yeah, I mean, the dialog is created with the script, and then the dialog just sits there, and when you click a button in the dialog, it runs another script that tells it to change layouts, whatever else you want.
But does it always stay in front of FileMaker? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, you can choose whether to have it always stay in front of FileMaker or not. Actually, no, I think they always stay in front of FileMaker, but you can actually make them on top of all dialog, all windows in the system as well, or not. So here's a chat dialog box, and we have a scrolling field, and this input box will also scroll if you type it up. And here's an example of a button that we moved off to the side instead of below the fields.
Who's it chatting to?
With, yeah.
Oh, that's just an example of a dialog. It's not linked to anything, it's not chatting.
Question about your dialogue, or feature.
Yeah.
Can you put the food types in, you reference a real value list?
Yes, yeah. As you saw, the parameter to the radio buttons was a value list, so you could, okay. So you could just call the FileMaker value list function to return a value list and put it in there.
And Chris, same thing with a field, you can actually, right now, you were doing stuff within variables, which you can designate a field for direct input.
Right, you just have to, well, not direct input, I mean, you can put an and symbol and then put the contents of the field embedded within the value of the parameter.
But for an input field, you can't have the user directly interacting with a FileMaker.
Right. Yeah, there's no way for plugins to directly, well, there's sort of with SQL, but it's not very easy for plugins to write back to FileMaker.
But it's being invoked by a script anyway, so you probably
Yeah.
just do
The
a
script-
set field.
Your time, yeah.
Right, the script has to set fields based on the values returned from the dialog. The dialog can also set FileMaker variables directly, so if you want to just use variables instead of fields, you can do it that way. Here's an example of a multi-level pop-up menu. You can pick a user and then type a password. This doesn't actually do anything yet. Here's an example of things turn into links just by making them look like links. So anything that begins with www links turns into a link, HTTP turns into a link, and so on. And here's an example of stylized text in dialog. This is another unique feature. If we look at how it's done, it will look a little intimidating at first because all that stylized text is this RTF code. Now, I made it fairly easy to make changes to that with this Dialog Master tab. Just by having the cursor within this piece of RTF code, you can click RTF to text, and it tells you what it copied and converted to stylized text that can be pasted to a text editor. Oh, so I can just paste that text in here. I can change it. Copy it. And going back here, again, as long as the cursor is within this double quoted value, We can do text RTF, and it changes it. And we can evaluate it. And it says new text.
Wow.
Get back here. Next example. Dialog validation is handled in an interesting way. If we type in the wrong value here and say we typed 1, 2, 3, it closes the dialog and it tells you to try again. When you click try again, it shows you the same dialog with the thing that I typed in there. And I'll show you how that's done. This step shows the dialog with all the parameters of the dialog. And then it does a loop, and this loop is handling validation to check if you typed 1, 2, 3 or not. Or if you press cancel, it will exit the loop immediately. Here, we'll exit the loop if there were no errors, so if the validation is successful. On every field, there's only one field in this case, but this loop was designed to show more fields being validated. And then to show the dialog again, you just call this function with show remember dialog as a parameter. And it'll show the same dialog that the user is already typing in with everything that they typed. And loop back and just keep showing it to them until they type in the right thing.
I was worried about the cameras.
Okay. And here's another way of doing validation. This only works in a floating window, but if I type in the wrong thing, the dialog stays up because this button launched a script that looks at the results of the dialog, and it says I didn't type in 1, 2, 3. Try again, same dialog is still showing up. So that's just using a dialog that never closes, and it can only be done with floating dialog. You can control dialog position. This is at the lower right of the database window. Lower right of the screen, lower right of the FileMaker desktop, which on Windows there's a window that goes around all the other windows, and this would be at the lower right of that window that goes around it. On Mac, there's no such thing. It's 30 pixels from the top left of the database window, top left of the screen, etc. And this is actually telling the dialog to appear on top of this graphic here. So, the graphic was given a name, and the position of the graphic was passed into the script to put the dialog right on top of the graphic.
So then that way, if they drag the window around on the screen, you dialog is always going to pop up relative to that window before that graphic appears.
Right. So if we scroll this graphic up, and I'll have to go through all. So whatever's on the graphic. And here we have a progress dialog. Not too interesting, but nice to have. So I'll cancel that. And here we have a more complicated dialog. Notice it's actually formatted, there's multiple fields on the same line. This is actually done by setting the phone number field to a width of, I think, like 13 characters, 13 average size characters. And then the email field automatically expands to fill the remaining space of the dialog, so it's nicely aligned. And here we do the inverse. We set the state to 2 characters, zip to 5 characters, and the city field expands to fill the space.
Can you make resizable dialogues?
No, not yet. That is a possible feature in the future.
Does it, when you set it to 2 characters, does it enforce the 2 characters? Like if you type a third, it stops, or does it keep going?
No, that would have to be done with the validation discussed earlier. But yeah, that's another field on the wish item on the wish list. Let's see. You can also create variable numbers of controls. This one creates 3 checkboxes. And this is basically by putting all your controls into a single string. So the script creates a loop that creates a string of 6 checkboxes, and then you have 6 checkboxes. Third if you want.
Bad user.
And then the final example is just creating your own dialog. You can type whatever you want here. So, any questions on dialog master?
Yeah, based on what you were just showing, you're basically letting the data layer of FileMaker determine what the dialog box is. It strikes me that if your validation or execution requirements are going to be the same when you contract with that, you could really kind of modularize some of your dialogues system-wide by literally just passing things to them and
Right.
making it a little simpler.
Yeah, definitely. You can create a whole dialog with a single string parameter if you want.
Can you put icons on the dialogues?
Another feature on the wish list. Yeah, that's definitely one that I want to do sooner rather than later. People like
pictures with 1,000 words.